Hello, Darksiders. I hope everyone's doing well today. I want to make kind of a follow-up video on the previous video I just made about where the villains were in Star Wars, but this one's going to focus more on our two protagonists, Rey and Ben Solo. Now, as I said in the previous video, I still don't believe the tension between Rey and versus Ben is there, mainly because we've seen Rey defeat Ben twice already. But I want to dive a little bit deeper into that. Now, if you've seen the Vanity Fair article by now, as you know, when they showed the scene of Rey fighting Kylo, once again, they said that this will be the battle to end the age-old rivalry between the Jedi and the Sith. Well, I want to talk about that, in particular, the Jedi and the Sith portion. And there's a little bit of a problem there, I believe. And first, I want to talk about Ben Solo. Now, Ben Solo, the son of Han Solo, Leia Organa, turned Darksider, killed all the Jedi, and joined the enemy. Or is he? Now, this is what I want you to think of. I want you to try to expand your mind on this. Now, when you think of a Sith, when you think of someone who is a Force sensitive and has been corrupted by the dark side, or in some cases even just a regular person that's been corrupted by the dark side, what do you typically imagine? Well, the biggest thing about dark side users is clearly their yellow eyes, and usually they get some kind of deformality on their skin. Example, if you played the old Knights of the Old Republic game as well as the Old Republic MMO, if you choose to go to the dark side, your character will develop yellow eyes. Sometimes they'll get like a purple shadow going on their face, and sometimes their eyes will blacken. I mean, it makes it very clear and very obvious that you can see the corruption of the dark side. But we don't have that with Ben Solo. Now, why is that exactly? Well, there could be many different reasons. Now, yes, we have seen Ben murder Han Solo essentially in cold blood. That's pretty dark, don't you think? I mean, you're murdering your dad, so you can try to progress yourself further down to the dark side. But there's an issue. I want to take Kylo and compare him to Anakin's fall. Now, I understand Anakin's fall with the movie, and storyline-wise, kinda didn't make sense. I mean, he was trying to save the love of his life, and he was being corrupted by Palpatine, while with Ben, he kinda just went, oh no, Snoke is right, my uncle's trying to kill me, and fuck my dad, and he runs off. But yet, we clearly see a visual representation of Anakin's fall to the dark side. You know, he murders all the Jedi, murders a bunch of younglings even, and then goes to Mustafar and kills all the Separatist leaders. And what we do see in the one scene is his eyes do yellow. We see the dark side flowing in him. You know, it's blooming like a dark rose, and it's showing through his eyes. It's it's just visual representation of the dark side inside Anakin. But yet with Kylo Ren, we don't have that representation. We don't have that visual of the dark side flowing through him. Now, you can sit there and say, oh, but he has a red lightsaber and he wears all black. Well, believe it or not, there's this thing called gray Jedi that was in the EU, and sometimes they would have red lightsabers and they would wear black, but they weren't Sith. And I want to say, is it possible that maybe Kylo Ren and Snoke are just gray Jedi that use the dark side, but they don't allow it to corrupt them? I don't know. That's a theory. But I do believe right now that Kylo Ren, despite the fact that he has murdered his father, he did kill a bunch of Jedi, he's not necessarily a Sith, because obviously the dark side has not blossomed in him as it did other Sith that we've seen in previous games and in previous movies. It's just a very interesting thing to think about. And plus, another thing is, Ben does not proclaim himself as a Sith. He is a Knight of Ren. Now, we've received very little information about the Knights of Ren. There was a tease in them in the Aftermath books, and in The Last Jedi, it was kind of teased that they were Force users, part of Luke's academy that joined Ben when he fell. It's kind of unknown exactly what they are exactly. It could be something like maybe they're dark side worshippers, but they don't embrace the dark side to where it deforms their face or even makes their eyes yellow. And I want to bring up another point to follow up with that. We don't have the dark side representations in Ben, and when you look at Snoke, he is deformed. He's incredibly deformed. I mean, you can see his bones coming out in his arms. It's kind of unsettling, but yet he has the same thing. When you look at his eyes, they're bright blue. They're not yellow. They don't have that dark side coloration that we saw in Darth Vader, that we saw in Palpatine, and that we've seen in many different Sith throughout the Star Wars, the EU, and even in some of the more recent canon comics. It's just, it makes you think exactly what was Disney trying to do with the new dark side users, or the Knights of Ren. Because apparently the Knights of Ren replaced the Sith. And Snoke, though they say he is a dark deity, he is a very strong in the dark side, and maybe that's why his skin, his face is all corrupted, but at the same time, he's also supposed to be centuries old, if not over thousands of years old, and honestly, a being being that old, I would imagine that your body would definitely take some hits over the years and probably be a little deformed and decrepit. Now, is it possible that Snoke, though maybe he prefers the dark side, he doesn't allow it to control him. He doesn't allow it to corrupt him. Thus, that's why when we see the eyes of him and Ben Solo, we don't see the yellow eyes to symbolize their full commitment, or the dark rose blooming inside them that shows that they are fully on the dark side, like we've seen with Sith in the past. It is highly possible that though Snoke may be a dark leader and a dark being, he wasn't training Ben to be a Sith. He was training Ben to be something completely different. It makes you think. It makes you wonder exactly what was JJ trying to accomplish. I mean, it's an interesting theory, is it not? Because remember, when you get down to it, especially with the Vanity Fair article talking about how they want to build something new, and Disney clearly kind of wants to take the franchise in their own direction, well, you get rid of the Sith, you create the Knights of Ren, and you make them completely different from the Sith. I mean, it's very interesting. I mean, personally, I don't believe Kylo is a Sith. He is a Knight of Ren, and the fact that they haven't really shown the dark side corrupting in him, as we've seen in many different Sith, even throughout the movies, we don't see that. Now, you could do the argument that Dooku and Palpatine during the Clone Wars didn't show the dark side coloration in their eyes at all. Well, the canon explanation is Palpatine was using Sith alchemy to conceal the dark side within him, including the dark side representation in his eyes as well as most of his body. But the moment the gloves come off in Episode 3, and he doesn't have to hide himself anymore, the alchemy falls down, reduces itself, and we do see the dark side in his eyes, just as it's been shown in the original trilogy. And when you watch Dooku in the Clone Wars animation series, in the movies, his eyes were blue. But yet in the Clone Wars animation series, they made a physical effort to make sure that in almost every single scene we see him in, especially when he's using the dark side at full force, you see it in his eyes. That has been like a key representation of the dark side within Star Wars characters within the Star Wars universe, especially those on the dark side and proclaimed Sith. Yet we do not see that with Snoke or Kylo Ren. Now, let's get to the case of Rey. Rey, our self-proclaimed Jedi. Now, this one's a little bit of a tricky one, because Rey has definitely been an interesting case within the Star Wars universe. I mean, 2 movies in, we've seen her do just incredible things with just lack of training or really knowledge of the Force. For her, the Force is very, natural. It's like an instinct. She just does it. No problem whatsoever. Has no struggles. Which, honestly, I do think that damages her character, but that is beside the point right now. I want to talk about the Jedi aspect of her. Now, Rey has been very good at resisting the dark side in the 2 movies that we've seen. Or has she? It's kind of a mixed bag, because even though Kylo Ren offers her to join him, and even though she does willingly kind of go to the dark side cave and gets pushed in, she still resists it. Now, does that mean she's a Jedi? Well, it's kind of hard to really pinpoint that. So when we look at our other heroes, we see Anakin, he was a Jedi. We see him get trained in the Jedi Academy, and you can read the comics and watch the Clone Wars animation series, and you see him progress as a Jedi Knight. With Luke, he did have Obi-Wan to kind of mentor him at first, but then eventually Luke does seek out Grandmaster Yoda and receives some formal Jedi training. Because between 4 and 5, Luke was a self-proclaimed Jedi. Even in the Star Wars Marvel comics, someone does ask him, "Are you a Jedi?" when they're fighting on the now destroyed Jakku. He doesn't say he's a Jedi, he just says, "Well, I'm trying." And then in The Empire Strikes Back, we hear Darth Vader, tell him, he's like, "Yeah, you've grown. The Force is with you, young Skywalker." And, he recognizes that Luke has improved, and he goes, "Impressive. But you're not a Jedi Knight yet." So, at that point, Luke was still a self-proclaimed Jedi, but as I said in my last video, Vader does overpower him and get the upper hand. And when we get to Rey, the problem is she's successfully, in a mental battle between Ben and her, she successfully won. She successfully snuck around Starkiller Base, no disguise or nothing, which I'm fine with that. That's fine. But at the same time, it really sits there and makes you wonder, what is she? How is she good at this? And then, as we get further in the movie, she eventually does fight Ben and defeats him and gives him the scar that was originally across, the bridge here, and then it was magically here. Gotta love the inconsistency between the 2 movies, right? Now, Rey has received some training from Luke, though honestly, did she really? Now, this is something I want you to think about. Now, Luke said that he would train Rey a little bit, but the problem is, I don't feel like he gave her the real training. It seemed like Yoda gave Luke more training on Dagobah than Luke gave Rey on, whatever that planet was called. So, see how much I care about the name of the planets? But I just want you to stop and think for a moment. It feels like Rey received less training than Luke did during his time of Dagobah. And then, she's having the weird moments with Kylo Ren where they're force connecting, and in that moment she goes to try to join him. And it's really odd and really interesting. And the pure fact that her character does best Luke in combat, you gotta think, this is Luke. This is no longer Luke, Jedi Knight. This is supposed to be Luke, Grandmaster, and we have our main protagonist, Rey. She overcomes him in a fight. And then she goes off on her own, willingly gets captured by the First Order to try to save Ben. Now, there is some story point problems I have with that, like why she did it in the first place, why is she risking everything to save a guy that she saw murder his father? Don't know. I really don't know. And we get to the throne room scene and everything else, but once again she emerges victorious. And she takes the books of the Jedi with her. Now, here's an argument I heard. You know, the books can train a Jedi. They can train someone to be a light side user. So, you know, you could say after reading the books in episode 9, Rey is now a Jedi, the first Jedi in generations, I guess. I don't know how you want to word that exactly. But it's just I'm trying to figure out is why they chose to go that route with Rey and not allow her to receive like even just a little bit of proper training, like how Anakin received training and Luke received training. But now we get into episode 9, and they're talking about how the fight between Rey and Ben once more is going to happen, and that this is going to be the end of the rivalry between the Jedi and the Sith. But the thing is, I do not believe, one, Ben is a Sith, and I do not believe Rey is a Jedi. Now, I explained why. Because one, the obvious answer is Rey is a self-proclaimed Jedi. You know, she's self-proclaimed. She says, I am a Jedi. Though she hasn't really received kind of like the stamp of approval from any Jedi Masters. I mean, there's a lot that probably should have happened in The Last Jedi for her, but it didn't. But, I mean, I'm looking at it this way, with Rey being the, as far as we know, the only self-proclaimed Jedi that's alive. She will become the next Grand Master Jedi, and she'll probably turn the Jedi Order into something new. Now, we go back to Ben, and he's not a Sith, he's a Knight of Ren. You know, because he doesn't refer to himself as a Sith. He refers to himself as a dark side user. But yet he does not, he clearly hasn't shown that he's fully committed himself to the dark side of the Force, such like his grandfather did and many other Sith before him. I believe the Knights of Ren, though they are dark side users, they are something completely different. Now, there's only one thing I can think of at this point. I still believe that Ben's not a Sith, and I believe Rey is just a self-proclaimed Jedi. But if it's going to be the battle that ends between the Jedi and the Sith, like if this movie is supposed to end everything, where does that leave us? Well, that leaves us with Papa Palpatine. Papa Palpatine is, as far as we know in the Star Wars galaxy, the last Sith that appeared in the universe other than Darth Vader. And you've got to sit back and wonder, they've clearly very heavily teased that Palpatine is making a return in episode 9. Now, how he's going to do it, I'm not sure. And since Ben is a Knight of Ren, not a Sith, but a Knight of Ren, and since Rey is not officially a Jedi, she's a self-proclaimed Jedi, it probably means that, in my theory, Ben is going to kind of pull what Starkiller did in The Force Unleashed, where Starkiller was being trained as a Sith. He was a Sith apprentice. He was being corrupted by the dark side, but then, you know, he redeemed himself. He casted away that title and said, I'm now a Jedi. I theorize that Ben is probably going to do the same thing. He's going to cast away the title of Knight of Ren at some point, because he's going to realize that there's a evil that's even greater, and then he's going to be a self-proclaimed Jedi just like Rey. And then that probably will be the age-old battle of Jedi versus Sith. You know, Ben and Rey versus Palpatine in some format. I don't know. I'm not sure. I mean, it just makes you wonder exactly what the story department of the sequel trilogy was doing, what J.J. and Rian Johnson was trying to achieve. I don't know. I really don't know. I mean, and I'm sitting here, you know, I've been looking at, you know, canon novelizations and comics and such, seeing if I can get a better answer of what they're trying to do, and I just don't see anything. I mean, if any of you have better theories or proof that, yes, he is a Sith, or yes, she is a Jedi, I am more than happy to be called wrong on this, but through everything that I have seen in the movies and what comics we've had, Ben is no Sith. He is a Knight of Ren. He is not fully committed to the dark side because the dark side is not blooming in him like previous Sith. Rey is no Jedi. She's not entered any Jedi order that's been established, and she's barely had any training to be a Jedi. She is a self-proclaimed Jedi, which she'll probably end up calling her she'll call herself something new. That way that one, Star Wars breaks away from the Sith and the Jedi, and instead something new is created, just like how JJ said in his interview with the Vanity Fair magazine. He said that instead of returning to something, of a glorious age, they want to build something new. So what better way to build something new with the Force users than to replace the Sith and replace the Jedi? Now, as I said, this is just a theory. I have no real hard evidence. I have no proof. But I've just been, doing a little bit of self-proclaimed detective work. And this is just what I've come up with. This is what I've seen. It's just very interesting that they're saying that this is going to be the battle to end the Sith and the Jedi. But I'm not seeing a Sith or a Jedi. I'm seeing two things that are completely new. So anyway, what are your guys' thoughts on this theory that I come up with? Once again, I'm sorry this is a long video, but I had to break it down between each individual character so I can kind of show you all the evidence that I've kind of come up with my own theory. And I hope y'all did enjoy it. Once again, I honestly do believe that when Rise of Skywalker comes out, everything that we knew of Star Wars is going to be completely different, radically different, and it's going to change, and we're just going to get something completely new. I honestly don't know if that's going to be good or bad for Star Wars at this point, but we'll just have to wait and see. Until next time, Darksiders, this is Darkside Leathers, signing out.